Okay, this is a quick unscripted video, so I'm going to stutter, stop, and misspeak a lot. And I'm sorry, I don't know if I'll edit all of it out. Anyway, there are 3 reasons why aiming in Overwatch with a stick might feel bad to you. Number 1 is that on PC, you don't get aim assist. That means you have to do all of the aiming yourself, which really tests how good the stick support of the game is and how good you actually are with the sticks. The second reason that you can actually do something about is the inner dead zone. The game ignores all of your stick inputs up to 30%. That means you lose the range of almost a third of your stick that you could be using for aiming at slow moving targets. I'm going to change the aiming method to dual zone to show the third reason. In Overwatch there's an outer edge where you start spinning at maximum speed, and the issue with it is that it's fairly far away from the actual edge of the stick, so you again lose a bit of your range, and you also might feel disoriented because you start spinning as fast as you should when touching the edge, the plastic edge around the stick, before you reach it with your stick. So these are pretty large issues, and honestly, especially the inner dead zone in the center of the stick should just have a slider in the options menu. It's kind of crazy that they still haven't added it after the game has been out for however many years. So if you're on PC, you have a little superpower called external software. I'm gonna show you how to improve the Overwatch stick response with Rewazda. You can maybe achieve similar results with other software, which you might want to do because this one is paid, but this is by far the easiest and most effective method. So first, you're gonna have to create a game profile for Overwatch and get to this main screen. In this main view of the gamepad, you're gonna press on any direction on the right stick, click advanced, and in this drop down menu select custom. This is a separately paid feature called, I think, custom curves or something like that. Then you're gonna press this little wrench, and you want the 2 last points to have maximum values to basically not affect anything, and you're gonna use 2 points to counteract the inner and outer dead zone of the game. The first point is going to be at x value 0, which means it affects the whole stick no matter how far you tilt it, and the y value is going to be the amount of dead zone you want to counteract. I set it to 8,000 and it works for me. The second point, counteracting the outer dead zone, I set to 30,000, which is close-ish to the 7% the game applies, so that any input below the X value is going to be clamped to this, so it's not going to trigger the maximum turn speed. After you apply these settings, you're gonna press the button apply to slot 1. Now back in the game, in the overlay you will probably see the stick never really staying in the middle. That's because it's affected by the custom config, and it's making up for the dead zone, which means I can make small adjustments very easily without, trying to feel out where the dead zone starts, because it's basically instant. It's only as large as it has to be to prevent drifting. Also, if I tilt the stick close to the edge, it's not going to trigger the maximum speed as quickly. And after you make those changes, I recommend switching your aiming mode to exponential ramp, which gives you better ability to track targets at different speeds. With dual zone, the slower zone is fairly narrow. It's better to use it if you don't have a choice when it comes to counteracting the dead zone of the game. But if you do, it's definitely better to go into options, controls, and in the advanced options for controller to change the aiming mode to exponential ramp. Now that was solution number one, but it's going to take you only so far. Solution number two is, if you have a PS4, PS5 or Switch controller, you can use gyro aim. Basically, this is as close as you can get to mouse aim with a controller. You can rotate it left and right in the same way you would move the mouse left and right to move the camera. Same with the y-axis, obviously. And you have a one-to-one translation from your movements to the camera movements, which makes it just easier to play in general. This might be a little awkward if you haven't played the game this way before. If you've played Splatoon, you are probably familiar with it. But in general, if you want to actually compete with mouse players, this is the way to go. Now, the nice thing about this control method is that using ReWASD is no longer important. You can achieve pretty much the same results with Steam input, which is what Steam's controller support is called, although you will need some external software for that as well, but it's all free. And another free piece of software is Joyshock Mapper, but it's fairly advanced, so it might be hard for a beginner. So, in this case, other than adjusting the stick, which is now going to be mapped to the mouse, you might want to adjust your curve differently, but if you want to copy my settings, these are mine. So, to activate gyro in ReWASD, you're gonna press any direction on this little icon. Then map it to a mouse with this button. Disable the smoothing because PlayStation controllers don't need it. With Switch controllers, you're gonna set it to 2 so that ReWASD interpolates the inputs. In the advanced options, if you want the sensitivity to be flat like with the mouse, you're gonna put just one point at the floor of the graph with a y value of 0, and its x value will determine the size of your dead zone. There is one applied by default, but this is how you can override it. The rest of the points can just be on the top right side of the graph so that they don't affect anything. And with the stick, I also recommend having a fairly deep curve, even though you're not really using it for aiming anymore. Now you're aiming with the gyro and only really making big fast turns with the stick, which is why you're going to have a pretty high sensitivity on it. My sensitivity for the mouse in Overwatch is 6.5%. My sensitivity in ReWASD, if you want to copy it, is 50 for the x-axis and 26 for the y-axis approximately. And for the gyro, I have 40 and 27 for each axis. Now to readjust while using motion controls, you're gonna want to create a gyro off button. What I use is on the circle, which is by default crouching in the game, I create a turn gyro off mapping for the long press, which means you can press the button quickly to access its original function, which is toggling crouch, so you don't need to hold it while playing. And with a long press, so while holding the button, you can actually turn off the gyro and readjust. But to turn the gyro back on, when you release the button, you're gonna want to press the last tab here, which is a release press, and map it to turning gyro back on. So that's pretty much it. In Steam, the setup is going to be a little more annoying to get it to actually play nicely with the game, but actually mapping the buttons to what you want is going to be even easier than in ReWASD. Joyshock Mapper is a little more complicated, so good luck learning it if you decide to go that way. It has some nice extra features, but I recommend beginners to stick with ReWASD if you want a less annoying to set up solution for non-Steam games, or just Steam's controller support if you want to fiddle a bit more to get the game to work with it.